Let's look at Kamala in the 60 Minutes interview, the same one that Trump was too scared to do. So Kamala came and, of course, knocked it out of the park. And now MAGA is trying to create whatever narrative they can about it to make it seem worse than it was. So I thought, why not check it out ourselves and dispel the falsehoods?
I'm going to make sure that the richest among us who can afford it pay their fair share in taxes. It is not right that teachers and nurses and firefighters are paying a higher tax rate than billionaires and the biggest corporations. And I plan on making that fair.
And as she absolutely should, like, yes, queen, right? That's the saying nowadays. But Trump's tax plan gave disproportionate breaks to the wealthiest people by tax breaks that only or disproportionately apply to them. Pass-through income tax breaks, which only affects the top 10%. Raising the threshold for the AMT, which only affects the top 10%. Raising the threshold for the estate tax, which disproportionately affects the top 10%. Lowering corporate tax rates, which is only a break for the top 10, mainly the top 1% in this country, on top of the loopholes that they already have. We speak numerous times on people like Elon utilizing unrealized gains to buy things. We talk about Trump leveraging his net worth to get loans, doing so fraudulently, which is what his New York case was about. Elon, for instance, however, put up his Tesla stock to buy Twitter and then meanwhile, never had to realize those gains. He just put up the unrealized gains, which is something he's not being taxed on, essentially making this an untaxed income. Jeff Bezos makes most of his net worth the same way while paying minimally in taxes on his income that pales in comparison to the full amounts of his wealth, which leads to the middle class paying higher percents of their income to taxes, while the corporate and the top 1% are, in some instances, getting money back on their tax returns. It's disgusting, and it's this kind of money that can be better use funding programs to help those below us, using money from the wealthy to fund tax breaks for the middle class, for the people who need them the most.
There are lots of signs that the American economy is doing very well, better than most countries, I think. But the American people don't seem to be feeling it. Groceries are 25% higher, and people are blaming you and Joe Biden for that. Are they wrong?
We now have historic low unemployment in America among all groups of people. We now have an economy that is thriving by all macroeconomic measures. And to your point, prices are still too high. And I know that, and we need to deal with it, which is why part of my plan, you mentioned groceries. Part of my plan is what we must do to bring down the price of groceries.
Spot on. By any economic metric we can look at, our economy is doing really wonderful, especially in rebound from a pandemic, where we have the highest energy independence in history. We have lower inflation than other developed countries. Wages are at all-time highs, historic spans of low unemployment. Just last month, 250,000 jobs were added. The job market has been booming and outperforming expectations almost every single month. GDP growth also outperforming expectations. More small businesses starting now than pre-pandemic. But after recovering from a recession, from a pandemic, obviously there are still going to be some issues like prices, for instance, right? Even though wages are outpacing inflation and have been for multiple years, this is still a large problem, which Trump plays a large part in the problem and why they're up. But of course, correlation, right? And most people don't care about causation, but I digress. And the only one talking about a solution to that is Kamala. We now know that corporations are passing more costs on to consumers than their prices have increased by as much as 25%. And Kamala wants to penalize price gouging, which would do away with this exact process, while Trump has no plan for it. Tariffs is his plan, which would raise the cost of goods on consumers, and tax cuts that would disproportionately affect the wealthy, netting the average middle class family only a couple $100. That isn't going to fix their grocery bill for the year. It isn't going to fix their rent prices. It's not going to fix any of these things. It's only going to make the problem worse.
So what do you say to that criticism that rather than leading the way, you in Minnesota are actually out of step with the rest of the country?
President Trump may be referring to that our children get breakfast and lunch in school so that they can learn. He may be talking about we have a paid family and medical leave policy that was promoted by the business community. Donald Trump spends his time tearing down states rather than lifting up the things we do, the best of it. Donald Trump's critiques of that, not only are they wrong, but I'm waiting for what is his solution. Here in Minnesota, we're so optimistic we walk on water half the year.
Exactly. The radical policies that the right tells you to be so afraid of the left, the communism of the Democratic Party, is programs like guaranteed breakfast and lunch for kids in school, paid family leave for families having a baby, things that'll bring on the real destruction of America. And it's really because the right has to try to paint policies like this in hopes that it will brainwash their cult. Because if these people realize that the Democrats are the ones proposing the things that most people want, that poll overwhelmingly, like over 80% support among Americans, then there's no debate to be had on which party to vote for. So that's why they just say they're radical, their policies are radical, we're not going to talk about policy. Instead, we're going to move the goalposts and focus back on the culture issues, which is why Trump doesn't expand on policies, why MAGA can never coherently speak about any policy ever, because none of them care about it. It's all about hate, bigotry, attacking and demonizing whatever minority group they can so people will vote out of fear. And that doesn't sound like the kind of America that I want to be part of.